it almost feels like balancing on a razor's edge at times because it's like I could fall into this and I could drown in this, or I could kind of catch my breath a little bit and breathe into it.
Every leader has a story, but the most powerful ones aren't the polished versions you see in the headlines. I'm Lisa Jones, and welcome to the Leadership Story, where we talk about real women, real leadership, and real resilience. I'm talking with Jenna Muñiz, a licensed professional counselor who turned her childhood trauma into her calling. Jenna grew up in a chaotic environment with parents struggling with addiction and domestic violence. She could have let that define her. Instead, she used it to fuel her purpose. Just 4 years into her practice, specializing in complex trauma therapy, Jenna recently took the leap to open her own practice. She's not just helping others heal, she's showing what it looks like to lead with vulnerability, to parent with intention, and to be the person you always needed. This conversation gets deep. We talk about calling the police as a child, learning leadership from people who didn't model it, and why vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the connecting fiber of what makes us human. If you've ever wondered if your struggles disqualify you from leadership, or if you've been running from the thing you're meant to lean into, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Let me introduce you to Jenna Muñiz. Jenna is a wife, mother, a licensed professional counselor, and a recent first-time business owner. She has specialized in complex trauma therapy for nearly 4 years while working in the behavioral health field for nearly 9 years in various capacities. Jenna's personal experience of growing up in a chaotic environment led her on a path to end the cycle of dysfunction and trauma and help others to break their own cycles. On a personal note, she's preoccupied with her husband, her teenage daughter, and 3 dogs. She is also an avid reader, does yoga, biking, paddleboarding, and napping every now and again. Jenna, welcome to the Leadership Story.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you're here. First of all, I've always wanted to do paddleboarding. How long have you been doing it? And is it really as fun as people say it is?
Yeah, so this was very impulsive. A friend invited me out to the lake to paddleboard with her. So the following day, I ordered my own paddleboard and started
Wow.
paddleboarding pretty regularly.
Wow. That sounds great. I have to find somewhere or someplace to go paddleboarding. You have such a remarkable story, and I can't wait for our listeners to hear it. Just from our initial conversations, I've been inspired ever since our last one. And I look forward to sharing the story with other people that either may be in that situation or just can find some inspiration in just their lives right now. So let's talk about the beginning. You said that you grew up with parents struggling with addiction, which means you probably had to grow up faster than most children. What did leadership look like back then, and what were you managing that you shouldn't have had to do at that time?
Okay. Yeah, just trying to dice this up a little bit.
Yeah.
Leadership for me growing up, I think I had this framework of who the leaders in my life were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't necessarily see them modeling what I now believe leadership to be. So, a lot of leadership in my childhood was adults turning a blind eye, people not wanting to get involved
Yeah.
or cause waves.
Right.
And so naturally, I was left in an environment to where no healthy leadership was modeled for me, in addition to a plethora of other stuff that was not modeled for me.
Yeah. Give examples or moments where you felt from your childhood where you had to step up and make decisions or be strong in ways that, other children that you saw didn't have to.
Yeah. I think a standout moment for me is probably the first time I had to call the police for help. So, in addition to my parents struggling with addiction, they also engaged in domestic violence pretty regularly. The first time calling for help is a standout moment for me to where I remember running next door to my best friend's house because luckily my next door neighbor was my best friend.
Yeah.
and we called for help together.
Wow. And at the time, how large is your family? Or you're not an only child, right?
No, I have 2 older half brothers, so I'm my dad's first and only child, and then my mom's 3rd.
Okay.
Mm, so not a huge family.
And at that time, were you all dealing with this together, or was it almost something that each of you had to find your own way through, a path through it?
All of us were experiencing this together, and I think I can now look back and say that we were all trying to cope in the only ways that we knew how.
Right.
So, growing up, we lived with my dad's parents, and so they had a front row seat to everything that was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and more often than not did not intervene or get involved. And I can look back now and recognize that that was their way of coping and their way
Right.
of trying to get through it.
Yeah.
And this is one of those examples of someone who was in a leadership position that did not execute leadership.
Yeah. I can only imagine. It's interesting to see how different people cope with certain things, and we internalize everything and not realizing, or sometimes not realizing the effects that we are having on others, or how we're trying to protect others because we're trying to protect ourselves. So
Absolutely.
people who go through this either spend their lives running from it or turning towards it to say, this is going to mean something. When did you start to see your story as something that was preparing you for something bigger? Or have you seen that? Have you figured that out?
Yeah, I think that happened probably later in my 20s. So I'm presently 33. I'll be 34 later this year. But I believe like mid to later 20s when I was in my first role in the field as a family support specialist. So I primarily worked with families who had CPS involvement, whether because of addiction, domestic violence, whatever the case may be, and was going out into the home to essentially teach parenting skills. And so stepping into this capacity, even though it was so novel and anxiety inducing and very much unknown, because I was also such a young parent at this time who, again,
Right.
didn't have parents to really model after. I knew what not to do. But yeah, being in that role was really where I could separate, like, this isn't what makes me different from everyone else, but rather this is what helps me to help people,
Yeah.
is where I can empathize and relate deeply, even if it's something that I haven't been through directly. I have this vast amount of empathy for other people who have experienced trauma and adversity.
Yeah. That was one of the questions that I had is from your younger version, what skills do you realize that you developed from that, going through that? And I think, empathy, I'm sure, is a big part of it. From that point on, you made the decision to become a therapist, and now you're specializing in complex trauma. Let's talk about that a little more because, like I said before, I would I would think, and it could be counterintuitive, that although you experienced certain traumas in your life, sometimes I would think people would run away from that, and that would be the last thing that they would want to specialize in, because sometimes we try to run away from what we're called to do. I'm one of those people, but I digress. But what made you really lean into that and really want to take ownership and say, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be?
I think it was really a feeling like outside of the family that I've created, like this has been the most fulfilling aspect of my life. To lean into a source of pain, I've
Yeah.
learned and also been taught professionally, that's where the healing comes from. Like
Hmm.
this, it almost feels like balancing on a razor's edge at times because it's like I could fall into this and I could drown
Right.
in this, or I could kind of, catch my breath a little bit and breathe into it and be with this experience, be with this emotion, this thought, whatever it is, and not think that I have to run from it.
That is interesting. So, when you're helping others and working through their trauma, how do you navigate that? How do you hold space for your clients that you work with as well as yourself without getting, like you said, sucked in?
Well, I think to some degree, like, it's a little impossible because early days, early years,
Mm-hmm.
I'm only 4 years into this. I wanna say the first couple years, I was getting sucked in quite a bit, and it was affecting my home life, it was affecting my personal life, and that was another moment of vulnerability to lean into and have this willingness to explore, like, why am I taking so much on?
Yeah.
And really having to learn for myself that I can balance empathy for what someone is experiencing, and I can also balance that with radical acceptance for the fact that I can't fix it for them. I
Yeah.
can just bear witness to their lived experience as another human being.
Yeah. I love that. So I know that in just last year you started your own practice. When you were working in other practices, what were some of the things that taught you, or what were things that you took away from that you decided or helped you be a leader during those times?
Oh, that's such a thought-provoking question. I've had some really, really quality mentors. I've also had some that have illuminated what I don't want to do.
Right.
And I think staying rooted in the human experience and staying humble, even though that is something that usually happens through adversity or vulnerability, some sort of like difficult feeling usually comes along with being reminded of our humility.
Right.
And I don't want to ever get to a place of not believing what someone is telling me or questioning what someone's telling me because at the end of the day, I'm not judge, jury, executioner. Again, I'm just here to hold that space and to bear witness to your human experience.
Especially in the climate that we're in currently, it's easy to fall into that part where we want to be judge and jury for people or taking things with a grain of salt. So it's always hard to navigate, what's truth, and also understanding that that's someone's lived experience, and we have to be cognizant of that, even if we don't always agree with certain things that people may say or do. And I'm
Yeah.
sure in your practice that lived experience, especially in trauma, because everyone has their own how they remember things had happened, which I always find interesting. We can all live in the same family, but everyone has their own story of what they saw. Uh,
Mhm.
so being able to just listen and be open minded, I mean, that's helpful for anything that we do. So, as a new business owner, what surprised you of actually putting out your shingle and starting your own business?
To be, just vulnerable and transparent because that's the theme here.
Yes.
I'm always surprised when someone reaches out and is like, "I wanna work with you." I'm like, "Me?" Like, there's a plethora of people to choose from.
Oh,
And,
lovely.
again, like, that's another moment of, like, humility and a moment of acceptance for myself that whether it be word of mouth, whether it be something my Psychology Today profile said that resonated with someone, the fact that, like, my lived experience and what I can bring to the table personally, professionally with my skill set, the fact that someone else connects to that, like, that's amazing.
Nice. And I always find it humbling because if that's what I perceive that I'm putting out and people validate for that for me, I find that humbling because there's a perception that we want to put out in the world and we hope people see it the way we see it. And when people validate that for us, I think it gives us a little energy to continue to do and to know that we're on the right track.
Yeah.
When you're working with, your clients who've been through trauma, what do you want them to understand about their own strength and potential? What do you see in them that they may not see in themselves yet?
I really want them to be able to see themselves the way that I see them.
Yeah.
I want them to like experientially acknowledge just how magical we are as human beings. And that subsequently includes them, even though most of them wouldn't agree with that right off the bat.
Right. Yeah.
To be in the physical seat that I get to be in across from someone else, I've never lost sight of how much of a privilege and how much of an honor it is to bear witness to just how magical they are as human beings.
Yeah. And also how resilient that we can be once we realize that. I think that's always important as part of that journey.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add, like, I think that magic that I'm referencing back to the vulnerability for the people that I've known and gotten to work with thus far, unimaginable experiences they've had,
Yeah.
and they still choose to come and be vastly vulnerable, whether they recognize it as vulnerability or not. The fact that they're willing to still have a degree of hope
Mm-hmm.
that things could be different and have a degree of curiosity for their lived experiences.
Nice. I love that. Wow. I'm just taking that in.
Yeah, I get emotional talking about them.
I'm sure. So, talking about, your lived experience and now and you being a parent of a 14-year-old daughter, how does your own story and your work shape how you parent her?
Well, really unpacking that in a bullet pointed way.
Yeah.
For those who are parents, I imagine you would agree with this that parenting is one of the most triggering things that we will ever do.
Oh, yes.
It very much highlights where all of our work is that's left to be done, whether
Yes.
it's feeling rejected by your child or struggling with boundaries or whatever, right? Like just any aspect of parenting is so triggering for us. And
Yes.
so kind of bridging these points across time, like my experiences as a child, not having healthy parents, caregivers in my life to model, like how to be a quality parent while dealing with triggers, stress, the socio political climate that we live in, the geopolitical climate we live in,
Yeah.
and still like showing up for the people that I serve in a professional capacity, how I serve my family. It definitely has its impacts. And so coming back to that razor's edge of vulnerability, I could be fearful about this emotion that comes up in me or want to avoid because I feel like I'm failing.
Yeah.
Or I could lean into that vulnerability. And one of the things that I've gotten pretty good at, thanks to Dr. Becky Kennedy, is repairing.
Yeah.
And if no one has listened to Dr. Becky Kennedy's TED Talk about the single most important parenting strategy, I highly recommend.
Wow. Okay. I can't remember where I heard this, but someone had said that your children are a hyper reflection of your vulnerability. So all those things that you
Mm,
may not have dealt with when you were growing up, your children reflect that. And it, like you said, can be triggering. I totally understand that so well. How are you instilling in your daughter, um, basically to have strength to also be able to show vulnerability, and helping her balance work through that because 14-year-old, that's a whole bundle of fun.
you don't say. Yeah, I
So
think just having these, as a past client of mine taught me, having these micro conversations instead of these like big whopper of conversations with them, right? But having
yes.
these micro moments of attunement along the way, this empathic acknowledgement to not only her but also to myself, like, hey, I really messed that up,
Yeah. Yes.
or like I should not have said that or done that, like, and I yeah I, I wish I could do that differently, and next time I'm going to try to do that differently, really
Yeah.
showing her that there's both and to all situations, because again, attuning to what you're saying about 14 just being its own mixed bag.
Yes.
And especially again, like in the socio-political climate, I think acknowledging that two things can be true at the same time, that we
Yes.
can mess up and we can also strive to do better.
Definitely. And the pressures of teenagers today compared to what we had. Now, again, now I understand that you were going through a lot, but even, our generations, or even though you're 33, I'm older, but still, I feel like I don't even know if if I could navigate through some of the pressures that they go through.
Yeah,
And I thought the pressures that I was going through were big deals. So I can only imagine what today's generation is going through. But I have to.
absolutely.
It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I was just gonna add, I often tell her, like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the right thing is to do here. Like, I need to sit and think about it, or I don't know
Yes.
how to respond to this in this moment, or even just with the gravity of everything happening around us. Just holding that space of like, I'm not sure what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And like we are in this together.
Yes. I love that. So, if you could go back to your younger version of yourself, what would you tell her about the woman and leader that she's going to become?
Ah, so emotional because this is very much what I tell my clients in their progress is that you are intentionally and actively becoming the person that you always needed.
Say that one again. Say that for the people in the back. I love that. Oh my.
Are intentionally and actively becoming the person that you always needed.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna need you to trademark that and put that on a bumper sticker. That seems to be every time I talk to someone, they have a bumper sticker moment. You need to put that on a t-shirt. Yes. Oh my God, I love that. I'm gonna write that for myself and put that on my laptop just so I can have that.
Yes.
Love
Yes.
that.
Put that everywhere for you to see.
Yes, yes. So we're at the final question, and the final question I have for you is, what is the word that you would use to define your leadership story and why?
I feel like I gotta go with vulnerability. The way I see it, and this is really pulling from a lot of Brene Brown's work, is you cannot have vulnerability without bravery.
Oof.
And I don't think that you can be an effective leader without either of those qualities. Because, in my opinion, just in my lived experience, I think to be a leader, we must acknowledge our own humanity, how that relates to the people that we are leading and modeling this for, to where others feel safe enough to show up authentically and to claim their own power.
Okay, you just quoted my favorite person, Brene Brown. Love her, and I love that vulnerability. We don't. I think as leaders, we tend to not lean on that. And how important is that to help us move through the world, also recognize our strengths, and also be able to lead people authentically? I love that.
Yeah. I think one of the greatest misconceptions of all time has been that vulnerability is a weakness. Because when we lean into our vulnerability, we're leaning into the connecting fibers of what connects all of us living beings.
Yes.
And just to stay on the Brene Brown bandwagon for a moment longer, if you and listeners are not familiar with her Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto, I highly recommend checking that out as well for anyone else that is also just struggling with parenting or anticipating that they're going to struggle as a parent. I wish I knew about this a decade ago.
Nice. I love it. I will also put that in the show notes because I am a huge Brene Brown fan.
Yes.
So, Miss Jenna, where can people learn more about your practice?
People could learn more about my practice at my website. It is echoesandemberstherapy.com. Or you could also find me on Psychology Today.
Love it. First of all, thank you so much for being on the show. Fun fact for people, she's related to a certain person. I won't say their names, but you'll probably figure it out at the end. It has been a pleasure and a joy to talk to you. I appreciate you taking the time to share your story, and I am just excited about your next chapter with your new practice and look forward to one day actually meeting you in person one of these days.
Yes, I would love that. And this was incredible. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. You are intentionally and actively becoming the person that you always needed. Say it again for the people in the back. It's one of those truths that hits you right in the chest. Jenna didn't wait until she had it all figured out to step into leadership. She didn't wait until she healed all her wounds before helping others heal theirs. She just showed up, messy, human, and brave enough to be vulnerable. And that's what makes her a leader. If something in this episode resonated with you, connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me what stood out. Maybe you'll be a future guest on the show. Subscribe to The Leadership Story on Substack or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to leave a review. It helps women find these conversations. Links to Jenna's practice, Echoes and Embers, therapy.com, Dr. Becky Kennedy's TED Talk, and Brene Brown's Wholehearted Parenting Manifesto is in the show notes. I'm Lisa Jones, helping you discover the leadership story you were meant to tell.